They tell you the bedroom is a private place, and that lie alone has protected more broken marriages, silent resentments, unhealed egos, and misunderstood souls than any other myth we have ever normalized. Because what really happens behind closed doors is not about bodies, it's about power, fear, validation, rejection, childhood wounds, control, shame, and the desperate human need to feel chosen again and again by the same person, and over 20 years of listening, observing, counseling, and watching patterns repeat. One truth keeps screaming louder than the moans people fake and the silence they endure. The bedroom is not where intimacy starts. It is where honesty finally runs out of places to hide. Most people enter relationships believing love will automatically translate into passion. That commitment will protect desire, that loyalty will keep curiosity alive, and that time will somehow polish intimacy instead of eroding it. But time doesn't polish anything unless effort is applied with brutal awareness. And after years pass, the bedroom becomes a mirror no one wants to look into because it reflects everything you avoid talking about during the day, the resentment you swallowed to keep peace, the boundaries you never set because you feared abandonment, the attraction you never nurtured because you assumed it would survive on memories alone. The first secret people learn within the first few years is that desire is fragile, and instead of protecting it, they shame it. They treat wanting as something dirty once marriage enters the room. They stop flirting because it feels childish. They stop seducing because it feels unnecessary. And they stop expressing fantasies because they fear judgment from the one person whose acceptance matters most. So slowly, carefully, they lock parts of themselves away, and then they complain about distance as if distance arrived uninvited. Another secret that reveals itself over time is that the bedroom remembers everything. It remembers the nights you turned your back without explanation. It remembers the times intimacy was used as a reward or punishment. It remembers when affection became transactional, when touch was given only after demands were met, and bodies may forget details, but nervous systems don't, which is why some people feel anxious before intimacy even begins, because their body has learned that closeness comes with conditions. People rarely admit that most bedroom problems are not sexual problems at all. They are power struggles disguised as performance issues. They are emotional disconnections masquerading as low desire. They are unspoken resentments hiding behind excuses of tiredness. And over the years, couples become experts at avoiding the real conversation by blaming schedules, stress, hormones, or age, because saying "I don't feel safe with you anymore" requires courage most people were never taught to build. One of the hardest secrets to accept is that love does not entitle you to access. Marriage does not guarantee desire, and commitment does not cancel the need to be attractive emotionally and psychologically. And yet so many people stop choosing their partner daily and start managing them instead, correcting them, parenting them, criticizing them, and then wondering why passion evaporated, not realizing desire dies where admiration is buried. Over decades, it becomes clear that the bedroom exposes gender wounds society refuses to heal. Men taught to equate worth with performance and control. Women taught to associate desire with guilt and duty, both carrying silent expectations into a shared space without ever unpacking them. So intimacy becomes a battlefield where nobody feels understood and everyone feels blamed. Another truth people whisper but rarely confront is that many couples are faithful in body but unfaithful in mind, seeking validation, excitement, and emotional safety elsewhere, not always through affairs, but through screens, fantasies, work, or friendships that offer what the relationship no longer does. And the bedroom senses this shift long before words catch up, because desire cannot thrive where attention has already left. Years teach that communication doesn't fail because people don't talk. It fails because they don't listen without defending, they don't ask without accusing, they don't express without demanding, and in the bedroom this shows up as silence, rushed intimacy, or mechanical routines that feel safer than vulnerability, because vulnerability risks rejection, and rejection hurts more when you're naked in every sense of the word. One of the most painful secrets discovered with time is how many people use intimacy to feel worthy instead of connected, chasing validation rather than closeness. And when validation doesn't come, they feel rejected, unloved, unseen, not realizing they never showed up as themselves, only as who they thought they needed to be wanted. Over years, patterns repeat like clockwork. One partner initiates, the other withdraws, one complains, the other shuts down, one feels unwanted, the other feels pressured, and nobody stops to ask the question that could change everything. What does intimacy mean to you now? Not 10 years ago, not before kids, not before betrayal, but now, in this version of us. The bedroom also reveals how poorly we handle change. Bodies change, energy changes, priorities shift, but expectations remain frozen in time. And instead of grieving old versions and creating new ones together, people compare, criticize, and silently mourn what once was, turning nostalgia into resentment. Another secret learned the hard way is that safety is the real aphrodisiac. Not candles, not techniques, not novelty, but emotional safety. The freedom to say no without punishment, to express desire without shame, to change your mind without consequences. And when safety disappears, no amount of advice can revive intimacy, because bodies close when they don't feel protected. People also discover that many bedroom conflicts are actually identity crises. Individuals who lost themselves in roles, provider, parent, caretaker, and forgot they were lovers first. And without reclaiming individuality, desire suffocates, because passion requires two whole people choosing each other, not two exhausted identities sharing obligations. Time reveals that silence is more damaging than arguments, because silence breeds assumptions, and assumptions harden into beliefs, and beliefs shape behavior. So a quiet bedroom is often louder than one filled with conflict, because it signals resignation, not peace. Another uncomfortable truth is that many people don't want intimacy. They want certainty, and certainty kills mystery, while intimacy thrives on curiosity, on seeing your partner as someone you are still discovering, not someone you have already defined, labeled, and reduced to past mistakes. Years also show that unresolved trauma always shows up in intimacy, abandonment fears, control issues, shame, fear of vulnerability, and unless addressed consciously, partners keep triggering each other unknowingly, mistaking survival responses for personal attacks. One secret few admit is how often people use the bedroom to negotiate power, withholding, performing, giving in, all to feel in control of something when life feels overwhelming elsewhere, and intimacy becomes collateral damage in battles that were never about desire to begin with. With time, it becomes obvious that passion is not lost. It is buried under routine, resentment, and fear. And when couples are brave enough to excavate honestly, not to blame, but to understand, intimacy often returns in deeper, quieter, more authentic forms. Another realization that arrives late is that attraction is influenced by how you treat yourself, your confidence, boundaries, self-respect, and when people abandon themselves to keep relationships, desire fades, because no one is attracted to someone who no longer exists as an individual. The bedroom also exposes how poorly people handle rejection, taking it as a global verdict on worth instead of a momentary emotional state. And this sensitivity creates pressure, making intimacy feel like a test instead of an experience, something to pass rather than share. Over years, many learn that intimacy cannot be scheduled into existence without emotional alignment, that date nights mean nothing if conversations are avoided, that touch feels empty if respect is missing, and that sex cannot fix what honesty refuses to face. One of the quietest secrets is how many people stay in unfulfilling intimacy because leaving feels scarier than settling, and they convince themselves that wanting more is selfish, unrealistic, or immature, not realizing that desire for connection is not a flaw, it is a signal. Time teaches that comparison is poison. Comparing frequency, passion, or experiences to others creates shame instead of growth, because every relationship has its own rhythm, shaped by personalities, histories, and choices, not social media illusions. Another lesson learned is that forgiveness is not forgetting, and unresolved betrayals, emotional or physical, live in the body long after apologies are spoken, requiring consistent safety, patience, and accountability, not pressure to move on for the sake of harmony. The bedroom also shows how often people confuse love with endurance, believing that tolerating dissatisfaction is proof of commitment, when in reality, honest communication and mutual effort are the real markers of maturity. With years comes the understanding that intimacy evolves. It becomes less about performance and more about presence, less about frequency and more about depth, less about proving and more about choosing, but only if people allow themselves to grow instead of clinging to outdated expectations. One final truth that experience reveals again and again is that the bedroom never lies. It reflects the health of the relationship with brutal accuracy. And when people are willing to listen to what it's saying instead of silencing it with excuses, intimacy stops being a secret and starts becoming a conversation that can transform not just relationships, but the way people understand themselves, love, and the courage it takes to stay emotionally naked long after the clothes come off. Over time, another pattern becomes impossible to ignore. People expect their partner to read their mind in the bedroom while refusing to read their own emotions. And when expectations go unmet, disappointment turns into quiet punishment. Less affection, colder tone, emotional withdrawal, all while insisting nothing is wrong. And this passive distance slowly teaches the other person that trying is dangerous, because effort without clarity always risks humiliation. Years also reveal how deeply shame shapes intimacy. Shame about bodies, about desire, about aging, about wanting more or less than what feels acceptable. And instead of challenging shame, people accommodate it, dimming lights, avoiding mirrors, rushing moments, disconnecting from their own sensations, and then blaming their partner for the emptiness they themselves are afraid to confront. Another secret learned slowly is that many people don't fear intimacy. They fear being truly seen, because being seen means your needs might be judged, your fantasies misunderstood, your vulnerabilities mishandled. And once that fear settles in, people choose predictability over passion, routine over risk, because routine feels safer than rejection. Time makes it clear that control is intimacy's quiet killer, controlling outcomes, timing, responses, emotions. And when control enters the bedroom, spontaneity leaves. Because desire cannot be commanded, it responds only to freedom, curiosity, and mutual willingness. People also discover that resentment is rarely loud. It accumulates silently through small disappointments, unmet expectations, and unacknowledged sacrifices. And by the time it shows up in the bedroom, it has already rewritten the emotional contract, turning closeness into obligation. Another truth surfaces as years pass. Intimacy suffers when appreciation disappears, not grand gestures but daily recognition, the feeling of being valued beyond utility. And when someone feels taken for granted, their body often mirrors that emotional neglect by withdrawing. Many couples realize too late that intimacy requires emotional maintenance, not emergency repairs, that waiting until desire is gone to talk about connection is like watering a plant after it has dried out. And yet people keep postponing conversations because discomfort feels more threatening than distance. Time also exposes how often people confuse peace with avoidance, thinking that not fighting means things are fine, while the bedroom tells a different story, one of disengagement, mechanical closeness, or complete absence, signaling unresolved issues that silence has only buried deeper. Another secret learned is that intimacy changes after emotional injuries. Harsh words, broken trust, repeated dismissals, and pretending otherwise only deepens the wound because bodies remember what words try to erase. Years reveal that curiosity about your partner must be renewed, not assumed, because people evolve, desires shift, fears change, and assuming you already know the person you share a bed with is one of the fastest ways to emotionally leave while physically staying. People also learn that pressure kills desire faster than rejection. Pressure to perform, to initiate, to respond a certain way. And when intimacy becomes an obligation, the nervous system resists, even when the heart wants connection. Another uncomfortable realization is how often people outsource intimacy advice while avoiding personal accountability, reading tips, watching videos, seeking techniques, all while refusing to have the one honest conversation that would actually change things. With time, it becomes obvious that intimacy cannot coexist with contempt, subtle sarcasm, eye rolls, dismissive tones, and even if affection remains, desire slowly fades under the weight of disrespect. Years teach that reconciliation in the bedroom requires emotional repair outside of it, apologies without defensiveness, accountability without excuses, consistency without demands, because physical closeness cannot heal emotional neglect on its own. Another pattern emerges. People expect intimacy to compensate for loneliness, boredom, or lack of purpose, placing unrealistic pressure on the relationship to fulfill every emotional gap. And when it fails, disappointment is directed at the partner instead of the emptiness within. Time also shows that intimacy is influenced by how conflict is handled, whether disagreements end with understanding or victory, because unresolved conflict doesn't disappear, it waits, and the bedroom often becomes the place where unresolved emotions resurface silently. People learn that desire responds to presence, being mentally available, emotionally attuned, not distracted. And when attention is constantly elsewhere, intimacy feels like an interruption instead of a connection. Another secret revealed is that intimacy often fades when people stop feeling admired, when compliments disappear and criticism becomes normal, because desire grows where appreciation lives. Years reveal that many people confuse intensity with intimacy, mistaking drama, jealousy, or emotional highs and lows for passion, not realizing true intimacy feels calm, grounded, and safe, which can feel unfamiliar to those conditioned to chaos. Over time, people understand that intimacy requires courage, the courage to risk awkward conversations, to admit dissatisfaction without blame, to express desire without entitlement. And without that courage, the bedroom becomes a place of repetition instead of renewal. Another truth learned is that intimacy cannot be rushed back after long neglect. It requires patience, rebuilding trust, relearning each other, and forcing closeness often backfires, reinforcing avoidance. Time exposes how often people stay silent to protect their image, wanting to be seen as easygoing, undemanding, understanding, and in doing so, they erase their own needs, later resenting their partner for not meeting needs they never voiced. Years show that intimacy is deeply connected to emotional regulation. When people cannot manage stress, anger, or disappointment, their bodies struggle to open because intimacy requires a sense of inner stability to feel safe. Another realization is that intimacy thrives on mutual effort, not equality measured in numbers, but fairness felt emotionally. And when one partner feels they are always carrying the emotional load, desire slowly erodes. With time, people notice that intimacy declines when curiosity about self disappears, when individuals stop growing, reflecting, evolving, because stagnant inner worlds rarely create vibrant connections. Another quiet truth is that intimacy requires intentional repair after distance, acknowledging gaps, naming disconnection, instead of pretending nothing happened, because pretending teaches the body that honesty is unwelcome. Years reveal that intimacy is not a destination reached once, but a practice revisited again and again, shaped by honesty, presence, and the willingness to meet each other where you are, not where you used to be.